We are here.
It always disorients me more than I think it's going to.
Welcome everybody to the Ben and Ryan show. We had Ben. You didn't change up your tagline.
No, I did. I think I was pumpkin pie or something
That's right.
last week.
You went back. Yeah, but you've been dog owner.
Have I been dog owner before? Well, dog owner
so.
for me is very relevant because our dog is just driving us bonkers. She keeps getting us up at like 4 a.m. for her breakfast. And if we try to ignore her, she will growl and bark, and it's slowly killing us. And so that's why I'm a little low energy today. I'm trying. I'm rallying.
Man, 4 a.m.
Yeah, it's awful. She's just been. It's like when we change the clocks.
How old is your dog?
She'll be 14 in February, I think.
Okay.
So she's definitely getting old, and she's lost almost all of her hearing at this point. And we think we're gonna have her tested for something called I think it's called Cushing's disease. Okay. There's something, she might have maybe a thyroid problem or something that's just driving her out of her normal behavioral patterns. But it could just be that she's old and crazy.
So not a dog person. I don't hate them or have bad feelings towards them. I just don't have great or good feelings.
That's fair. That's fair. To each their own.
Yeah. So question. So we have 2 guinea pigs.
Nice.
That I was tricked by the pet store and told that we could leave for the weekend and they could take care of themselves. But no, we still have to get guinea pig sitters anytime we leave for any short period of time.
It's crazy, right?
But and if anything were to happen to them, they're just guinea pigs. We would just
replace
circle of life. They would run out the back, and it help some other animal survive. But people are really tied to their pets. So what do health bills look like for aging pets? Something you want to talk about? I mean, is it?
Okay, so just to paint a picture here.
Painful.
Our dog has had a lot of special needs. She's torn both of her ACLs, which in dogs are actually called CCLs. It's one of the ligaments in the rear knee.
Okay.
So she's torn both of those. So she's had to have surgery for both of those, which is not cheap. She has a lot of allergies, so she has to be on this allergy. It's like an immunosuppressant kind of I guess it's like an antihistamine or something. So she has to be on that. She's also had a bladder issue her whole life, where the little sphincter that keeps the bladder closed internally is loose. So she has to take this other special medication that kind of strengthens that muscle. Otherwise, she'll just pee on herself. So she actually has her own pill box, and she accounts for like 30% of our counter space in the kitchen between all of her foods and her various pills and her treats. As she's gotten older, ironically, she's become less expensive. She's just had fewer major issues. All of her major issues were when she was younger.
Okay.
But now the cost is all emotional as she reaches into our soul and just slowly crushes it.
Oh. It is 7 years. Is that the math for dog years?
Yeah. I mean, so I love this dog, to be clear. When she dies,
to deal with what you've had to, you have to love the dog.
But she has just kind of gone off the deep end. She's become incredibly needy. She just needs to be around us all the time. And I think maybe part of that is because she's lost her hearing. So she's never sure if people are in the house. She has to be next to you. And she just panics if you walk out of the room. If you try to close her in a room, she'll start barking and freaking out. It's just become a lot.
Oh.
Yeah. It's become a lot. So I'm tired.
All right. Well, we'll try and jazz you up with an amazing show.
So, well, so you called out my thing here, ChatGPT celebrity. What's that about?
Okay. So this week I'm preparing some stuff, and I was searching for the features for Cold Fusion 2025. I was like, all right, well, let's have ChatGPT kind of do up a little summary for me. And so it did a little summary. I can see Ben already smiling. He knows where this is going because I sent him the email. So at the bottom of the results, this is ChatGPT. Like, I don't think it looks at my browsing history. So it says, oh, hey, if you want more information about the subject, check out this video. And sure enough, there is the video that you and I did with Mark Takata. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, man, ChatGPT is recommending us. So that's why the ChatGPT celebrity. So yeah, I was shocked.
You must have a paid version for ChatGPT, yes, then I assume. Okay, because I think if you're on the free tier, that's like I'm on the free tier, and I think it doesn't do recent stuff. I'm not sure.
Correct. Yeah, mine can search the web. It can. I actually have a plugin, so it takes over the search for my browser.
Oh wow!
So if I just type in the address bar a term, it used to go to Google. Now it goes to ChatGPT. I saw it on there. I was like, let me test it. I saw people commenting that it may be they ended up going to Google still for things, and I do find that. I think it'd be awesome if on the plugin they had a link that if once you did the ChatGPT search, that you could hit a button and it would then just do it on Google as well, or whatever search engine you want. I shouldn't assume the world runs on Google. I think there's another one or something.
It does, to the point where they've now been sued for antitrust violations. So I think it's pretty safe to say.
But yeah, but it's interesting to kind of see what it comes up with and to say, okay, hey, because I've definitely used it. It did its summary of whatever my search was, and then I did click on one of the links it gave because it does citations. So I'll click on one of those just kind of see that full article and see what more information they had in the actual thing. So it's been good. I'm a big fan, huge fan of ChatGPT.
I'm starting to get into it a little bit more. I still haven't developed the muscle to make it my first go-to for search for specific types of search. If I have a very open-ended question that feels like I want an explanation, that I go to ChatGPT for. But if I'm looking up something much more targeted, I still just go to Google for that.
Yeah, I've done interesting things where I use it just for like brainstorming where my wife will ask me, hey, what do you want for dinner this week? And I'm like, I have no idea. So I created my own GPT where I put in the food preferences for my family and I'll say, hey, give me 20 ideas for dinner this week. And it'll give me 20 ideas for dinner. And I'm like, perfect, here we go. Here, honey, I'm gonna start reading these off to you. And she's like, oh, yeah, that's a good one. So now she jokes with me, and I ask her when she asks me, she's like, "Are you just asking ChatGPT?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am."
I am keen to try the new multimodal stuff where you can actually have a voice conversation with it. I tried it just for the first time. I don't know, last night or the night before on my phone, and I think you just have to get into the right mindset, because the first kind of gut reaction that I was having was sort of the first time I had an Amazon Echo where I would ask it questions and it felt like they just felt so generic, the answers, that I got very turned off by it. But I think it's like a prompt engineering. Like you just have to figure out how to talk to it so that it'll give you the right kind of answers that you're looking for. I think I expect too much magic right out of the gate.
Yeah, I don't know if I could just talk to it yet, because you said as working on the prompts, you kind of have to see it and say, okay, hey, let me rephrase that question.
Like I was listening to an interview, I don't know, last week or the week before, and this guy on the interview was saying that he takes his car to work and he'll have a voice-based conversation with ChatGPT the entire ride to sort of get him ready for the day and to help him think through problems. Huh. And I love that as an idea. Like I could imagine myself walking the dog outside if there's no one else around and thinking through problems in a way where I'm bouncing ideas off of ChatGPT or some sort of equivalent.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like you have to be in a very different mindset to be having a conversation with a machine. I know that sounds crazy, but when I'm talking to a person, it just feels very different still. And maybe that's a factor of age. Like I didn't grow up with this stuff. Maybe it'll be much more natural for people that are younger.
You're talking to ChatGPT. You keep saying operator.
Yeah.
Operator.
Oh man, I love it.
All right, so this week, I mean, who knows what we're going to talk about? We're titling this podcast "Learning," so we're kind of talking about and throwing things out, that things that we're learning or that we have learned about, or just kind of how to deal with learning in a work environment and home. And so, you guys, on that topic, learning about ChatGPT and AI, there's a bunch of different AI out there, and I've seen some Gemini commercials recently where their big thing is they're talking to Gemini.
I know. And I feel the same way in that commercial. So we've started watching more streaming stuff, and there's a lot of commercials on streaming services these days. And they have that one, and there's the guy is sitting there with his friend. He's like, so I'm just supposed to talk to it? And I'm like, that's how I feel. It doesn't feel right.
You guys working on the car. Okay, I can see this. Oh, look for this.
But all of the AI,
you're hallucinating. It's not that kind of car.
All of the AI stuff is definitely stuff that I want to learn more about. The way I've been using it lately is more just conversational. Like sometimes I ask it technical stuff, but it's usually higher level technical stuff. But I have seen a couple of demos online recently about people doing not just code generation, but like multi-file code generation with things like, is it Cursor? And I think ChatGPT has, I saw something called Canvas. I haven't tried it yet. Do you have Canvas in your paid version?
I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Canvas, I know. Actually, no, Canvas I'm thinking of. But I'll have to look at that. And that's supposed to do multi-file.
I think it's supposed to be more like as opposed to a conversation where you're just, I guess, using the previous conversation as the prompt for the next message. I think this is more of like I'm saying stuff I don't really understand here, but like a stateful code editor. I think it's trying to be more like all of the Visual Studio Code Insight stuff.
Yeah, like the code pilots and stuff.
Yeah. I think it's supposed to try to take at least maybe more of that form factor. But
that's a huge use case, is the people giving it just kind of the kind of bullet points of what they want their code to do, and it at least gets them. It saves them like, let's say 20% of the time writing out the first pass.
Yeah,
and they go and people can then just tweak it. Or I've seen, I think I've heard the Copilot or the Copilots, or some of those can actually learn your style of coding, and you can put in your preferences so that if you have certain naming conventions, it'll keep with that naming convention.
Yeah, I think someone was saying, was this on Syntax FM maybe, where they were talking about in Cursor, I think it was, you can actually designate a file that is like your style guide for how you write code, and it will implicitly use that for all of the suggestions that it gives you, which that seems very powerful, because I'm super opinionated about how I like to write my code.
Yeah, I know with I think even now the free version of ChatGPT, you can create your own GPTs, and you can pre-prompt it with things and files. So I'm sure you can do something like that where you have here are my instructions I want you to do every time, and now let me go into my Ben Nadel code correction or my code helper. And that GPT knows all about your stuff. And
it's so interesting. It's one of those things though where I feel like I don't know how to best learn about it. It feels a little bit like when it comes to something like a programming language or a piece of technology, it feels obvious to me, or at least much more obvious, because I can always start with the documentation. You know, if I want to learn about MySQL, I can go to the MySQL docs. I can just start reading through, or I can look at the release notes for a particular version. Where something like, how do I best use AI? I feel very much in the dark in terms of strategies. And I almost just want to take a course for someone else who has done all of this work. I like the concept of AI, but I'm not like an AI enthusiast. What I'd love to do is outsource all of the hard tactical stuff to somebody who wants to spend a lot of time thinking deeply about how to use this. And then hopefully they put together a book or a course or something, and then I can just watch that. Cause I don't know, it feels very much to me like a little bit of a kryptonite. I don't know how to think about it. I don't know how to roll it into my daily gesture in terms of thinking. It's very challenging. I don't know. I just feel very challenged about approaching it.
So I'll tell you my approach to it, where I kind of like our podcast. I don't go into it with any kind of preconceived outline.
Yeah.
I'll get into it. I'm like, hey, give me ideas about the subject, and then use it really as like a brainstorming. And so it'll give me some stuff, and I'll ask more about this, and I'll say, hey, let's do this, and have it produce some information for me, and okay, summarize this, and have it kind of just piece together, and we work through whatever I'm looking to do. So sometimes I'll give it some of the fun. One of the big time savers is I'm able to take, let's say, a transcript. So I'll do a customer interview, and I'll take that transcript, I'll plug it into ChatGPT and have it create other documents for me. So if I want to do a written document of the summary of that, and I can tell it the different sections that I want. So I already have my outline. So I feed it my outline in a transcript, and then it creates something. It's not perfect, but I can then re-listen to the recording. I can go through and I can say, okay, hey, let me tweak this, or I want to change that wording, or I want to move some stuff around. But I've always found it challenging to have that first step through writer's block. Okay, let me just get started. But this gets you through that, and then you can just start. Then you can start kind of creating.
I like it. I think that's the thing, is that you're proactively using it as a top of funnel, so to speak, in terms of your thought process. And I feel like I tend to now, I keep going to it when I feel stuck, and I feel like maybe I need to start introducing it just earlier on, like you're saying, just to brainstorm and get an idea of how you want to approach things.
Because it's surprised me with ideas before, where I didn't think through how to do something, or I had somebody asking me to do some VBA code. Everyone's wow, my VBA, that's amazing.
Yeah, what do you even
use
VBA
full time?
Is that for desktop computing? What is VBA even used for?
That is for Office.
Office, okay.
So Visual Basic for applications.
Gotcha.
So it's Microsoft's kind of bastardized Visual Basic. So none of those are good topics. But there's a lot of Excel. This is for Excel, and there's Excel specific stuff. I'm like, I don't want to try and teach myself this. Oh, ChatGPT. Hey, I need to get a VBA code to do X, Y, and Z, and 3 seconds later, I have the code. I'm like, that's perfect. I didn't know any of these VBA functions for Excel, and now you just did it all for me. Again, it's not perfect. You have to tweak it or fine tune it, because you may not have given it all the information, but it kind of just gave you a shell, and then you can say, okay, now that I have the shell, I can do different loops, or I can add in additional loops in places, whatever you want to do for that. So unfamiliar things, kind of giving you some familiarity with that, and then you can kind of tweak it, has been another big thing I've used it for.
The unfamiliarity stuff, though, I get a little nervous about that, because if I'm asking it technical questions about a topic that I understand, I can see, not clearly, but I can see with better clarity where it's clearly right and where it's clearly wrong. If it's something that I have no notion of, I feel like I have no BS detector at that point, and I can run things and they can either work or they don't work, but I don't necessarily have an instinct for, is this even a good idea, or is there something really problematic in here? But so I guess going back to our Dakota Clum episode, you have a risk appetite, and if I have to create an Excel formula that references like 3 other cells on a different sheet and does some aggregations, I never remember any of that stuff, and I always have to Google it. If I could get ChatGPT to just give me this formula, I can plug it in and it either works or it doesn't work, and that feels very much safer. But if I'm in an area where a mistake is going to be either too subtle or problematic, I get very nervous.
For math, another one area that you should not use it. It's not great.
Yeah, that's what I'm told.
And there's tons of documented examples of it being terrible at math. I saw one which someone asked if it was a prime number. I think it was 2023. They're like, oh, it's 2023 a prime number. Like, oh no, it's because you can divide it by 117. And you're like, oh, and I'm like, what's 117 or what's 2023 divided by 117? They're like, oh, it's like 17.2.
You're like, you keep using this word. I'm not sure it means what you think it means.
Yeah, there's not a whole number. They go, oh, you're right. So it's not a prime number.
Now, I have a mentality that maybe is going to start to hold me back. I have historically not liked the idea of copy pasting code. And to be clear, I'm not against looking things up and, finding answers on Stack Overflow. But historically, what I've liked to do is see the answer on Stack Overflow and read through it and then try to recreate it, like in my head, translating what their code is doing into the way I like to write code. And that I feel has always helped me build a better mental model for what the code's actually doing. And then by putting it into my own style, it cements it a little bit better into my head. And this doesn't always work. Like the other day, I was asking ChatGPT to help me come up with the algorithm for signing URLs for Amazon authorizations. Like if you do what they call a query string authentication, a pre-signed URL, it does this crazy thing where it hashes a value and then it uses that as the key for the next hash, which then uses that as the key for the next hash. Does this multi-layer? Yeah, it's crazy. And I missed something very subtle in when I was rewriting the code in my own style. And it took me like 8 hours to debug. And I'm not saying that copy pasting it would have solved that problem, but the issue is going back to this idea of this sort of multi-file context where I'm using something like Cursor AI to actually generate multiple files. If I keep in this mindset of wanting to manually recreate the code instead of just copying and pasting it, I don't know if I'm really going to get those speed improvements, productivity improvements if I don't lean into the idea of copy paste. But I'm afraid that I'm going to give up some of that ingraining it in my head kind of a gesture.
You can still do that, and maybe layer in AI for the troubleshooting. So instead of spending the 8 hours, say like, you know what, I'm going to give it 20 minutes, and then I'm going to say, hey AI, what am I missing here? This is giving me this output. It should be giving me this. And I've not tried that, but I've heard that the AI can find those little tiny things that you may have missed, or that and maybe it's not even that you've missed, or it is probably that you missed, but it could also be something that you generate if you just were to sit and explain to someone who doesn't know coding what you're doing. Then you're like, oh wait, oh yeah, oh here's my problem.
Yeah.
So it was one of those.
Well, it's like I do find it does particularly well when I copy and paste errors into the chat and ask it why it's happening, and it'll come up with things that I would never have thought of. Like I've been using Parcel.js as a JavaScript, as like a client-side bundler for some of my stuff lately, and you can get into these weird edge cases where it like progressively compiles the code and it keeps cached versions of files, of compiled files in this special folder. But if you rename a file that you've been working on, sometimes the compiler gets confused and it keeps referencing the cached version. It doesn't see the one that you've renamed. And this is, again, one of those things where I see this really obtuse error in the logs. I can't figure it out. And I paste into ChatGPT and they're like, oh, try deleting your parcel cache directory. And I deleted it. Worked like a charm. And I'm like, okay, that just saved me, probably a day of debugging and pulling, rabbits out of hats. So I do like it for the error stuff. Copy pasting, stack traces, that can be super, super helpful. But I don't know. And I'm also like, I'm just so slow to try stuff. And it's a double-edged sword. I think the slower you are.
I mean, I see stuff on LinkedIn all the time about new things you're trying.
I'm always experimenting, but I'm experimenting very slowly with things, and I'm very slow to adopt. So, for example, the world has moved on to Visual Studio Code as their editor, which has some really great GitHub Copilot integration because Microsoft owns everything. But I still love Sublime Text, and that's my editor of choice, and it doesn't really have a Copilot integration that's anywhere near easy to get going. And I just don't want to switch to Visual Studio Code just so that I can get Copilot working. And I know that sounds like really such a silly constraint, but I just get stuck on these weird little mental hurdles, and I can't get past them sometimes.
So what's the reservation on Visual Studio?
I just really like Sublime Text. I've been using it for years. I know it fairly well. All of my key commands, I have all this muscle memory built in. It's really fast. It just feels like a good editor. And I've tried Visual Studio Code once or twice because we had some stuff at work. We were doing what the heck were they called? Dev containers. It's some sort of Microsoft technology where you can spin up an EC2 instance on Amazon. I don't know if it's EC2 specific or not. I guess that's just like any cloud provider, I'm assuming. But you basically spin up a remote cloud instance, but then you can sort of wire in I think it's like a local service, and you can kind of you can essentially take a production network and then hook in just a local service, and it does, I think it's called like telepresence, where it kind of wires it in virtually somehow. I don't know, but it's like very tightly integrated with how Visual Studio Code works. So I had to use Visual Studio Code to get that to play with that. And it just, I don't know. It just feels,
after that.
It just felt so different. Everybody has such an easy time switching. It's hard for me to switch stuff. I don't know why. Lifelong challenge. I'm too dedicated, Ryan. That's my problem.
That's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Sometimes.
All right. So learning. I see stuff I see stuff all the time from you. You're experimenting with stuff. Now, you and I really have, it's crazy. I mean, we've kind of just met here a few months ago. So I don't know all of your past. I know you are kind of shutting down operations at the current company. Were you actively kind of learning and testing and playing with new things even in the heyday of when things were rolling? Or was this more recent?
I've always been a very active learner, but I've always also felt that learning in parallel with the work that I was doing for work, that was always the most effective. It was always, I had a problem that I tripped over while doing some sort of ticket at work yesterday, and I'm going to experiment a little bit with it in more depth today, and I'll write about it. And then sometimes things just go off in different directions that don't necessarily tie to work, but are maybe work adjacent. As an example, we use AngularJS at work, but AngularJS is end of life, and Angular has moved on to what they call like modern Angular. And I've continued to learn about modern Angular for the last 5 or 6 years, however long it's been since they released it, even though we've never actually used it at work. But then I also just use Cold Fusion personally in my life. My blog is written on Cold Fusion platform. And so I like to have, my blog has actually been really helpful for me to be a place where I can apply things. So whether I'm learning about Turbo, the Hotwire framework from Basecamp, which I try to integrate into my blog, or whether I'm learning about Alpine.js, where I'm trying to do that in some of my little side projects. I'm just never satisfied. I feel like I haven't found the right way to do things. And every context is different. So at work, we have a lot of single page applications, SPAs. But then there's also a lot of complexity that goes into a SPA-based architecture. So I'm now keen on letting the pendulum swing back a little bit the other way and going and exploring more in depth, kind of a more traditional multi-page application or MPA architecture, which is more, I think, what a lot of Cold Fusion developers are familiar with, where you're just making a request to the server and you're getting a full page refresh. But there's some technologies that you can sprinkle into that kind of a workflow that give you better developer ergonomics and better user experience when compared to things like jQuery of yesteryear. So I'm trying to find something that feels like it strikes a good balance between productivity and ease of architecture and like simplicity of mental model and user experience, kind of just finding where all the give and take in that spectrum is, if that makes sense.
I feel like I don't know if I want to do this on live podcast. I was like, you know what? We should do an experiment where we take what you just said, but put it in ChatGPT and say, what would you recommend for my architecture? Like, what should be my toolkit? Here are my desires.
This is the crazy thing. Okay, so this is where I start to actually get very frustrated with ChatGPT. And I do a lot of thinking. I mean, if I have one skill, I think it's that I can spend a lot of time in my head and try to explore different strategies. So what I find is that I'll go to ChatGPT and I'll pose a question like that. When should I use a SPA architecture? When should I use a multi-page application architecture? And it kind of regurgitates all the stuff that I already had in my head. And what I wanted to do is just tell me to do something. It's like I want that. I'm not someone who loves an open-ended nature. I do like to try to narrow in on a best practice or a particular set of rules for saying, do it in this case or do it or don't do it in this case. And what I find with ChatGPT is it does a lot of hedging, where it'll say, this is good and this is good, and you should weigh the pros and cons. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm telling you to do. So I don't know. I just want it to be more definitive sometimes, and I think it doesn't want to be definitive.
All right, we're gonna do this live just because.
Doing it live.
All right. Share my screen. We have no idea what's gonna happen here, or this is even a good idea.
They can always take it out and post.
We say that. We never do. We've never done that. Our post team is the easiest job. They add like a beginning and an ending, but they do a great job at it. I think that they do go through that and look for things. They've caught a couple things.
Nice.
So let's say here, what can I help you with? When should I use a SPA architecture, and when should I use a multi-page architecture? Let's see. Here's your answer. Here we go.
What's it got?
Oh, am I sharing my screen?
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I don't see it.
Did I not add it to the window? Oh, users. So in post-production, we need to take out the last 30 seconds. So this is okay. So live, we should probably. All right. So I can't see the screen. That's why I couldn't tell that you guys couldn't see my stuff. All right. So I just plugged this in, and I never correct my misspellings.
All
I
good.
Just type too fast. I just go with it because ChatGPT doesn't care.
Yeah, it seems to figure it out.
Yeah. So it says use a SPA in these situations, and then use multi-page MPAs. Oh, SEO is critical?
Yeah, well, because I think an MPA would be more of a publicly accessible site as well, just because you don't want to. There's the trade-off, or at least one of the trade-offs with SPAs historically, is that you have to load a lot more content up front, usually a larger JavaScript bundle. But with something where SEO is critical, you usually want to get that on the page as soon as possible. I mean,
want to question anything? Oh, here's a hybrid approach.
Yeah, I mean, so even the stuff that I do at work is hybrid. So even though we have a SPA experience, you still have to do things like the login form and the sign up form and the forgot password and the invite acceptance pages. And there's a lot of peripheral pages that just don't feel like they fit into a SPA style architecture. So there's always a lot of mixing and matching, I think.
Okay.
But this is why when I stumbled upon the Hotwire framework from Basecamp, this is why I was so curious about it, because essentially what their goal to do is to create a single page application like experience, but with a multi-page application architecture. And the way they do that is they sort of hijack clicks and form submissions, and then sorry, I'm just reading what you're saying there. So for those listening, he's saying, can Hotwire from Basecamp help?
Just generic. Just want to see what it.
So Hotwire stands for HTML over the wire.
So for all those listening,
Yeah,
it hurt Ben. It's like, oh, I should explain what Hotwire is.
But yeah, so essentially what Hotwire does, and this is a very high level concept here, is it intercepts the interactions that a user would do to normally trigger a full page request.
Okay.
And it instead implements those using an AJAX or a fetch request behind the scenes. And then it will just swap out parts of the front end. So in the way where a SPA might just destroy a view and then render a new view, this essentially does an inner HTML swap of a swath of the page to kind of do that same type of thing. And then Hotwire also has its own JavaScript framework called Stimulus. And Stimulus, you basically bind JavaScript controllers to parts of the HTML that automatically get instantiated using mutation observers. So it'll say like, oh, this div on the page suddenly showed up and it's bound to this controller. So we're going to instantiate this JavaScript class and bind it to this DOM reference, and it'll then destroy it if you remove it from the DOM. So it's trying to create that faster interactivity and the kind of more dynamic and precise changing of pages, but without a lot of the added complexity of the single page application architecture. Now, to be clear, we do some really complicated stuff in our single page applications, and I don't imagine that a lot of that you can probably do it, but it's the nice thing about a single page application architecture with frameworks like Angular or Vue or Svelte or React is that they're very component based. So you can build these complex interfaces using smaller components, and the components can talk to each other through events and other means. And you have a good mental model for how the UI fits together. When you're trying to then take that type of interaction and overlay it onto more of just a flat HTML page, I think you really have to change the way you think about how the page is constructed and then how parts of it are changed dynamically. And I am by no means any more than a novice when it comes to thinking about that type of approach. So it's something that I'm dabbling with, but it's very far from where I would say, well, this is clearly what we need to be doing in a production application.
Okay. So in this, let's see. So when can Hotwire help? Okay. So it's giving some stuff here.
Yeah. So it says rich interactivity without SPA complexity. It's basically, that's the one line interpretation of what I just said.
Okay. Go deeper. Pretend I am a developer.
Gotcha. So okay. I'm like learning here your prompt engineering tactics.
Oh, was he going to give you some code examples?
Excuse me. Yeah, so Hotwire has a couple of components. It has turbo links and turbo frames and turbo streams. I guess turbo links is now called turbo drive.
Okay.
But it's all essentially a way to intercept and then to update parts of the page.
So it didn't look like it gave like a little more information, but it just gave code examples.
It's really challenging because I think almost what you need to do is change the way you think about the complexity of your applications. I think SPA application architectures give you so much control about the interactivity. I think people become more comfortable making interactions very complex. And to take that level of complexity and try to recreate it with this type of overlay onto a more simplified page architecture, I think you're really going to struggle. I mean, unless you're the Basecamp guys who created this whole framework and way of thinking. I mean, they famously have built Hey.com, which is their email client. And I think it has something like, what I was listening to an interview with DHH, and he said there's like 80 kilobytes of JavaScript, which if you're not familiar with the size of bundles for modern JavaScript applications, 80 kilobytes is like nothing. Like your downloaded font might be 80K.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like it's not unusual to ship multiple megabytes of JavaScript for a single page application. So the fact that they've built this interactive email client with like 80K of JavaScript clearly speaks to how far they can push the limits when they completely understand how it all fits together. And people do push back against them and say, hey, the experience is not as luxurious as if you were using a single page application architecture. And I feel like to some degree, they're totally fine with that. They're like, yeah, it's a trade-off.
Yeah.
It's fine that it's not quite as good as a single page application architecture, but you know what? We built
here you go.
We built this business on just a handful of people writing code. So they're optimized for just developer productivity.
So we're going to do one last thing here. And so in the comparison chart, add 3 more competitors.
Oh, interesting. All right, so it added SvelteKit, Next.js, and Blazor. And Blazor is part of the .NET world, I believe. So so it's really interesting for me to watch you use ChatGPT because you're very iterative on the topic.
Yeah, so in the beginning, that's one thing. Iterative is a good approach, a good word for it. So going into it, not necessarily knowing this, I just want to explore. So it gives me information, and I'm like, okay, how about this and this direction? And then, okay, here's a comparison chart. Okay, that's pretty handy. I didn't think of that before. So add 3 more competitors. Let me see what it tells me then. And so yeah, you could 100% just kind of keep. You see the stuff, and you want to explore a different direction. You, the king of tangents, would love this.
I know it's so interesting. I don't know what I have a mental block. There's some sort of mental block in my head that makes me uncomfortable to go into the exploration without knowing where I'm trying to go. And I have to work on that. I mean, I think that's clearly holding me back from digging deeper into this stuff.
Yeah, I'll send you this grid if you want to have it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, it's just like a good way to give perspective to how to think about stuff.
Man, we had no idea where we were going to go with that, and that was fun.
It was cool. So one of the other things that I want to learn, and I'm not saying we should do this in ChatGPT.
It's like, do it again.
No. So one of the things I love databases. I love SQL as the database language. But I've been using MySQL forever. I mean, not for any particular philosophical reason. It was just the database of choice at the companies that I've worked at. I used Microsoft.
Price point's nice.
Yeah, it's very nice, very attractive.
That's generally the selling point.
Yeah. So I'm just slow to change. So MySQL solves a lot of my problems. So I haven't had a need in any real way to look for something else. But I do know that people freak out about how great PostgreSQL is. And it would be great to be able to go into ChatGPT and just exactly like you did. What are some differences between MySQL and Postgres? Why would someone use Postgres over MySQL or vice versa? And I don't know.
Isn't it totally different structures?
No, they're both SQL based. And
is Postgres relational?
It's relational, but it also has extensions for, I think, a bunch of other things.
Okay.
So I think one of the selling points of Postgres, from what I've been just looking up lately, is that it's highly extensible. So while it's relational under the hood, I think you can get extensions that then apply different models on top of it. So you can get like a time series database, but I think it's ultimately relational under the hood, or you can get
Okay.
like a full text index kind of a thing, which is, again, I think it does something relational under the hood. It's had JSON support. I think it was one of the early relational databases to have JSON support, which I think is much more common now. But it seems to just be a database that's highly extensible. So people have all these little customizations that they make for it, or plugins that they can buy for it. But I feel, again, it's like I don't know I know how to look up an individual technology. I know how to go to something like a Postgres documentation, but I need to start thinking of leaning into ChatGPT to help me understand cross-topic concepts and weave things together better, like just like you were doing with the SPA and the MPA types architectures.
I mean, we're here. Let's.
No.
I mean, it'll literally take a minute. Let's say, compare MySQL, Postgres, and MSSQL. Give me a chart showing the top 50 differences.
A chart showing the top 50 what?
Differences.
That's a lot of differences.
It is. I probably should have like 20. It's having to think.
You broke it.
It's like 50, really?
Well, what's some stuff that you're trying to learn? Or what have you been thinking about lately?
Yeah, so for while this is thinking here, did I even put it out to the screen?
No.
Oh, I did it again. Okay. Here we go. So we can watch it think. Okay. I may have broken it. As it's thinking here, yeah, for me, it's I'm gonna stop it and just do 20. I think 50 may be a bit much for it. For me, so much is so new. Yeah. So coming into, the last year and a half has been a huge learning curve for me, because I had not been in the hosting space before. I had not been in the Cold Fusion space before. And when I had the marketing department report to me from Expect Technologies and worked with them closely, we had an existing customer base and we sold products,
right?
And so the marketing was totally different. With hosting, we're attracting different clientele. We don't have in the space of selling servers and parts and everything, we had hard drives, which we could use to go grab new customers. Like, hey, I'm just looking for a hard drive. So we sell them a hard drive. We show them how amazing we are, and we bring them in. And we sell them a lot more stuff. We do that all the time. So we had that kind of that lower cost item, the entry level product, to get people in the door, to get exposure to us, and tons of customers and get referrals, that kind of stuff. And so with
was X-Byte Technologies, was it purely business to business, or was it business to consumer as well?
Business to business. Okay. We didn't sell any like home PC parts or anything like that. It was all okay. So guys, welcome back. We lost my power. So I'm going to come back here, and so here's the chart, and I'll send this to Ben of the comparisons.
Yeah, I don't see your screen if you think I do.
Oh. So good thing I'm 3 for 3. not being the producer very well on this one. So yeah, here are comparisons. I'll send this off to you, but yeah, so top 20 kind of.
All right, yeah, it's so interesting because people freaking love Postgres in a way that I don't see a lot of people loving other technologies. So
Yeah, there's some good user groups out there. That do there's I think they're on Meetup. So if you're looking to kind of have some Postgres conversations, I know I've seen some of those. We're looking actually to do some stuff because we host some Postgres customers.
yeah, I never know. I mean, I've only ever had someone else manage the hosting of databases. I don't know what goes into it.
Yeah, I should see who we have. Maybe get a conversation going with them.
Yeah.
So what question were you asking me that might when everything died?
I was asking you what you were thinking about, and you were saying the last year and a half has been a lot.
Oh yeah,
of,
a lot of
learning.
learning on stuff. The marketing is totally different, and you were asking about if Expedite Technologies is B2C or B2B, and it's just B2B.
Just B2B.
No, nothing for your home PC or anything like that.
Because when you were saying that you have cheaper products or less expensive products to get people in the door, I didn't know if that was for consumers or if that's
less expensive, meaning our ideal customer is spending upwards of $100,000 a year with us.
Right.
So, but to get them in the door, we also sell parts. So a lot of times they'll find us because they need a hard drive for their server or memory or CPU upgrade, and then they get to know us, and they're like, okay, yeah, let's do a server, and let's do a whole cluster, and let's do massive storage arrays. So that's someone said less expensive. It was because of the parts, and so we don't have that at cloud. We're comfortable in the premium brand space with cloud, where we don't want to be your GoDaddy. Doing a lot in that market. That's a very conscious effort that we've done. And so in doing that, at this point, at least, we have not discovered our entry-level product that's not hosting. Even if there is one, I don't even know if there is one. But trying to figure out, okay, hey, how do we do that? And so the approach to marketing has been different. A lot of it's been, okay, we have this cold fusion space. Let's now figure out how do we get into that whole audience. And something I've always loved doing is building and getting into a community and getting to know people and just being an active participant and giving back to the community as well as getting exposure and stuff. But you got to be honest with what you do and give back and really care about it. And so I took on that cold fusion space with this and have gotten into it and try and post interesting stuff and do these podcasts with you and bring on guests and talk about cold fusion, which I have no idea if any assistance at all with Expedite Cloud stuff, but you know what? If I can get more people into cold fusion, hopefully some of those use us.
Yeah.
So.
No, it's great. And the cold fusion community is a great community. It's not the largest community, but certainly all of the people that I've met here are absolutely wonderful. And, they need places to put their code.
Yeah. And I will say other learning I've done is with kids, and for better or for worse, they are a reflection of you. And so you get to see pretty quickly I'd say I notice my bad habits more than good habits.
That's funny.
I probably should see the good in my kids. I'm like, look how great I am. My kids do this and I do that too. But I mean, small things from if I like, I've sometimes they'll chew on a cuticle or something like a hangnail.
Yeah.
And I see my daughter doing that. I'm like, okay. I need to get better at that to be an example that she doesn't keep doing that. Like, okay, well, so it's bettering me, but you definitely see some of that or any of your reactions to things. And I'm like, yep, I do that. I think that's why she's doing that. I'm getting feedback.
Do they lean into or push away from the 5-second rule
for
food that drops on the floor?
Depends where we are.
Yeah. That's fair.
If it's at home, that's like the floors. We've cleaned it recently.
We know who we are.
Yeah. And we don't generally. We're in Florida, so we have it's not like carpets everywhere.
Lights, tile, and stuff.
We don't wear shoes inside the house.
Oh, forget about it. You're like, it's like you live on a plate. That's
Yeah.
fine.
So I'm like, it's pretty easy then to eat. But if we're out, it's like, But I'll tell you a funny story about parents with kids. The new parents, because if their child has a pacifier and like it falls on the floor, and we did this too. I'm not saying we didn't do this, but it's like, oh, that has to, you may have to like burn it or something.
Right. Exactly.
It's got to go through like sanitization, all this kind of stuff. And then when you have a second child, it falls on the floor and you're like, okay, you may suck on her, you may just wipe it off or just give it right back to them. And then by the time you have a third child, it's like he falls on the floor and you're like, wait, I didn't drop that. You pick it up. And you don't even care if it's clean. You're like, I got two others. You did that. Kid, you're on your own.
Oh, no, it's so true. It's my brother has told me basically the exact same story with his kids. He has two kids, and he's talking about how with the first kid, you're just terrified of everything. And with the second kid, you're like, nothing's going to happen to them.
They bounce.
Yeah.
It's amazing what they recover from. Just falls and
they don't have bones, it's all just cartilage for years, I think.
Yeah, thankfully.
So lucky.
Yeah, nowadays you fall and it's like, all right, I'll be
everything
feeling that
hurts
for like forever. I'm sure this will leave like a mark from when I hit my head with the bike.
That's like, I remember I hurt my shoulder one time working out. I don't even know what I did. Everything hurts all the time. And I went to, I was talking to one of the trainers at the gym and I said, hey, my shoulder doesn't feel so great. Do you have any recommendations? And he was like, oh, don't worry. Just give it some rest and some time and it'll feel better. And he paused. He goes, wait, how old are you? And I was I'm like, oh, I'm 30. He goes, oh, no, that's not getting better.
No. At 30?
But
that's not even old.
Nah. But so you were doing marketing at X-Byte Technology, and now you're doing marketing here, right? So it's same type of work, just different context.
Yeah, but completely, really different.
There's no social media, right? You're very into the social media aspects of marketing, it seems, with at least the X-Byte Cloud stuff. Did that even play a role at X-Byte Technology?
It did. There's an IT community, Spiceworks, that we were part of, and similar type style. They had like a conference, an annual conference. It was basically a collection of like IT people, IT service providers.
Okay.
It was all IT people, probably a little more early in their career, most likely, from what I've seen of it. But we had a great following there, and we did a similar thing where we first were just active in the community. They had online forums, and so people would ask about Dell servers, and we would be out there answering their questions. We would whenever we could, we'd post a link back to our site just to kind of try and bring some traffic back. But we're trying to be out there being good, educating people in the community. And then we would go to their conferences and we try and make a splash. We probably had one of the most visited booths the first year we were there. We did a server build challenge where our first year, were we blindfolded? I think we even no, I don't think we did blindfolded the first year. So I think the first year was just build the server. We had a bunch of spare parts that were damaged. We didn't take good stuff there.
Yeah.
We had two of them people could use, and they could try and build it. And we have a timer going. And you go, and when you're done, you hit the timer, and the best time won like $250 in this massive trophy.
That's awesome.
We had people there on the second day before we got there. We left the stuff, and they would have like their cadence of saying, "Hey, I do like drives and then memory and then whatever." And so they're like, "Hey, the memory section, I need to get faster at the memory section." So they'd be doing just the memory section, figure out where they're gonna put stuff, and it was amazing. And we'd have a crowd of like 20, 25, 30 people watching people do it, and just how fast.
Hilarious.
We had 2 injuries.
People building servers too hard.
We'd have like Band-Aids. People would cut themselves. It was So that was first year. Second year, we're like, we got to take that up a notch. We like the concept. People know us of that, and it relates back to us having servers. So we did it blindfolded. That was year 2, and then year 3, we said, okay, hey, we want to keep same concept, but we want to now have a wheel you spin, and instead of you being blindfolded, you may be like, you may have to eat a hot pepper and then do it, or you may have to do it while someone's squirting you with a squirt bottle. It's like a wheel of torture.
That sounds like fun, though. I like that kind of stuff.
So we were trying to bring something like that to Cold Fusion, but I'm like, we could have people build a server, but these aren't like techies that build servers. These are developers, so they're not going to. There's not the same audience. Like these guys kind of knew some of the hardware stuff, and so that was that worked. But we were like, okay, hey, do we try and have someone like deploy an application as fast as they can? Like, okay, hey, you have like a minute to try and deploy this while someone's squirting you with a squirt bottle.
FTP it up. Rapid deployment.
It relates to like people like working from home. Like, okay, you're working from home. Your kid's in the room with you. He's squirting you. No.
Oh man. Yeah, it's let me ask you, all right, if I can go in a different direction for a second, which kind of touches on things that I think maybe we're both interested in. So one of the other things that I'm trying to learn about more as of recently is accessibility in the digital space. So, people with special needs or special constraints, making sure that websites are still accessible. Mm-hmm. In a world where people are paying for stuff like an Xbyte cloud, or, I'm sure there's a lot of marketing materials. I assume accessibility is fairly important, although I don't know. I mean, is accessibility an issue that you guys spend a lot of time thinking about, or is that a different department?
We don't, but one of the beauties of being part of a family of brands is that the design department who does the core family websites, and then we kind of just inherit. We do some of our own look, but we inherit from them. They spend that time.
Oh, okay.
And then
nice.
We get to kind of just make use of what and so they've done the research. They'll say, hey, look, that contrast is not correct. You need to have there's a common one. There's not enough contrast between your font color and your background color based on the size of your object. So you've got to enlarge that or change up the color. And so they've already run through that. So they have the sizes down of buttons. They have the color contrast, because you may just have to pick a different blue because it works better. But yeah, they're great. They spend time on that because that's also affects their SEO nowadays. There's a potential of that. So they do that. And I mentioned this before. I don't know how people do that when they don't have the backing that we do. We really have on demand whatever we need.
I tell you, it does feel like so much, not that things have gotten so hard, but there are just so many things to consider, from accessibility to application architecture to disaster recovery to failover to deployments, pipelines, and continuous integration and testing. As much as I love the idea of being one person that can sort of get an application out of my head and into production, to do it quote unquote right, and to take all of the things you need to consider into consideration, it really does feel like you need a team of people with much more specialization. And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes. But
I think to accelerate that growth, you need that.
Yeah, absolutely. You just need to divide and conquer. You can't have the same person solving all the problems all the time.
And then you get that knowledge too that other people bring to the table, that it's like, hey, their experiences and stuff, and hey, here's a different way of doing things, or even if it's that person, so you're not constantly talking to ChatGPT to brainstorm. Hey,
yeah, exactly.
Occasionally you have to go to real people.
It usually drives me crazy at work. So we had this one meeting. I don't know if it was weekly or bi-weekly, but we had what we called office hours, which is essentially, I don't know if I've talked about this before, where people could just show up and ask questions. And it was whoever showed up would try to answer your questions, and they would ask and you would try to answer their questions. And it was so much fun. And it was my favorite meeting of the entire week because it was, tangents on tangents.
Yeah.
And I was always shocked that more people didn't show up. We were at a company where we had like 150 engineers, and maybe consistently like 6 different people would show up.
Wow.
And I don't know. I know everybody was really
Is it just the
busy.
introverts, or?
I don't know. I just thought it would be so much fun. And it's not like going to an online meetup where you have to reschedule your whole day. Like, this was built into the schedule.
Yeah.
Um, and I had always wished more people had showed up and we could just have some fun, sort of brown bag lunch sessions, lunch and learns and whatnot. But, I don't know. I didn't know how to motivate people.
We should do that as like a once a month, Ben and Ryan show. Or once a month, we have like a live audience that just comes in. And we bring them onto the stage. I think we can get up to 10 people here.
I literally have wanted to do that for like a year.
Have you really?
Yes. But I've never motivated enough to be able to figure out how to orchestrate it, because I know I can show up, but then can I get other people to show up, and where do we host it, and how does it get communicated out? I've absolutely wanted to take that dynamic of just a bunch of people show up and talk about random stuff and recreate it somehow digitally, and I just have not motivated to figure it out. So,
Well, so I think, so a shout out to all the Cold Fusion meetups out there. I'm sure other communities have meetups, but there are meetups. I don't know if they're necessarily, a lot of times I see the ones I've seen have been more structured.
Yeah, exactly. It's like presentation oriented.
Yeah. But I think, I was talking to Mark Takata from Adobe. And I believe he's doing something in the Sacramento area, but he's streaming it. And I don't know if it's just come and talk tech, or I think there is some sort of a presentation to it. But I'll have to chat with him to see if he's doing any open mic nights, where we already have an audience we can tap into. If not, then we can host it. I've done, at a previous role, again, using StreamYard as the platform, which we use here. Shout out to StreamYard. They've been great. If you want to give us a free month, go for it.
Free month's welcome.
Yeah. But we did it where we streamed the show to YouTube Live. So people could, that was the platform. You didn't have to log in to have an account. So that was the choice of doing YouTube as opposed to like a LinkedIn or something like that. We want to make it very easy for people to be able to participate. And so people would chat questions. And then what we would do is we would put the link, like we have a private link that you and I use to come onto the show. We would put that out there in the chat. And so if people wanted to come on stage, they could do that. And we had people where they wanted to show their camera. Occasionally most people I'd say would show their camera if they came on. But we had someone who didn't do it. I don't know if it was just they didn't have a camera, or people say that even if they have one.
Yeah. That's fair. Not everyone wants to be on camera.
Yeah. But that went over well. And you'd have people throwing out, and it was developers doing the better ones. We have more interaction. We have people doing code, and they'd have like, hey, here's my challenge, and they'd kind of post it, and people would help out. It was around an ERP we were using.
That sounds like fun. Yeah. If you're game to try and organize something like that, I get very nervous at the idea of organizing it because it feels like a lot of coordination. But
yeah, we'll definitely it'll take a little bit of work to make sure we have at least a guest or two who are willing to come on, because I have no idea. We've never tried one of these live, so I don't know how many people normally show up who would show up live. That one, when we did the interactivity, we already had a fan base, and we probably have 50 people who watched us live every 2 weeks. And so I knew I'd have at least that core group of 50, and some of those would want to show up and be on camera. I don't know if I have 50 people who'd watch this live yet. We're still early on.
I wonder if we could do almost like a crossover episode where, so I know the Ortus guys, the Ortus Solution guys, they have their Modernize or Die podcast, and they have people who attend live, I'm pretty sure. I wonder if we could do some sort of crossover where we have a co-meeting with them.
Oh yeah,
and because they have a couple of hosts and an audience as well. Just a thought. I'm just throwing out random ideas.
Yeah. We could bring up everybody together, like all the meetups, and say, hey, look, you know what? Bring our communities involved, and we'll see what this does.
All right, good food for thought.
Yeah, I'll reach out. I know the Oris guys. I know all the meetup guys. So
and they just launched their, I think, stable release of Boxlang, so that could be interesting.
Oh, is stable release out?
Or like a release candidate, something like that, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, we haven't really chatted about that. I have no idea what's going to happen with that. It'll be interesting to see where or what that does.
Yeah, it's super fascinating. I don't know. I mean, talk about like just people who have the courage to do something outrageous.
Yeah.
Create your own language. I mean, come on. Luis is a pretty brilliant guy, so I'm sure
he is very
it's
smart
got
and
deep thinking.
And I mean, it's interesting to see which audience may be impacted by that. If it is the Adobe Cold Fusion, but a lot of the ACF audience is government, and they probably wouldn't do anything that's
right
on the open source side of things. So that may not be affected. You have the Lucy audience, which is already open source, which my guess would be the biggest audience affected. But
yeah,
who knows?
It'll be interesting. I mean, I know that their at least primary intention is to consume it internally for their own products.
Yeah, and to reach out to people, and they want it to be like the next big language.
It would be so cool. Crazy world.
Will see. Crazy world. All right, so we will set that up. We're already at we had a little snafu in the middle.
Yeah. Should we call it there?
We can call it there. We've learned a lot. Hopefully, I've excited your creativity and potential use of ChatGPT.
I'm very keen. I need to wrap my head around it.
Now that you also were a celebrity. I mean, you were included. Your name is the front. It's the Ben and Ryan show.
There you go.
So you're also a ChatGPT celebrity. You can tell all your family. I showed up in search results.
Love it.
All right, everybody. Well, thank you for tuning in, listening. Hopefully you attend our live broadcast whenever we do that. And we have our brown bag episode coming. All right, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers.